This is Talk the Devils, the athletic show dedicated to Manchester United. Coming up with Crystal Palace up next for United at Old Trafford. We asked the question if super sub Benjamin Sesko should become a certain starter. It looks like Oliver Glasner will still be in charge just about for that game on Sunday, but we'll preview all the details of that. Plus, we'll explain the latest financial results and we'll get stuck into some of your questions as well. Critch is back. Hello, Critch. Carl and Andy are also here as well. There's finances involved, Critch, so you have to be here, mate, don't you? It's part of the contract, isn't it?
It is. I thought I'd escape this. I thought I'd become like at least the fifth Beatle rather than just the numbers Beatle. But no, I don't think I'm going to shed that tag either. So
it's useful, mate. The rest of us don't really understand it, so it's nice to have someone who's properly clued up. We'll get to that a bit later. I know everyone's salivating about it. So let's talk about the football. Let's get stuck in straight there. Carl, we talked about it a bit on the last podcast, didn't we? Benjamin Sesko, absolutely incredible impact he's had off the bench under Michael Carrick in recent weeks. Should he start the game this weekend against Crystal Palace? That's the question. What do you think?
I would like him to start, but I totally accept if he doesn't. That's my viewpoint. I think
Why would you like him to start?
I think he's putting together a good body of work coming off the bench, the threat he has when running in behind, and in these first halves against West Ham and against Everton, there's been just a bit of stodge, a bit of drift, a bit of a lack of clarity. I think back to that moment in the halfway mark where Bruno Fernandes has just got his hand out going, where's my options? Or two or three times against West Ham where you've got Mbeumo and Ahmad, they're trying to do sort of quick interplay 1-2s, and you're going, this isn't quite working. Teams are now beginning to clog up midfield. So get the 6'5" lad, stand on your centre-backs, and then see what else happens next.
Andy, what do you think?
Let the manager and the coaches decide. They're the ones who are seeing him every day. It's working out just fine right now. Manchester United are winning. Benjamin's coming off the bench, scoring goals, different goals, great goals. We spoke to him at Everton the other night. He's happy with his lot. Although clearly footballers like to start football matches. He'll find his level. He'll either become, an absolute starter. That Thierry Henry was Arsenal. Ruud van Nistelrooy was the main man, but it's still his first season. He's overachieving. His goals in 2026 have been really good and encouraging. He's going to get so many chances, and I just think football has its way of working things out, whether through injury or not. And it's nice to have this option because if you're Crystal Palace's manager going into this match at the weekend on Sunday, you don't know who United are going to start. And Benjamin Sesko is completely different as a player to the other players who have been starting. So that will bring doubt and uncertainty in your team selection. And there's been times where Manchester United have simply not had that in recent seasons. So if he starts, great, good luck to him. If he comes off the bench, he'd be coming off to a huge roar because goals will be expected. It's a really good asset to have coming off the bench.
There's a couple of things in that which I'll come back to in a moment, but Critch, I just want to get your opinion with that flat question. Should Sesko start?
I'd start him. 6 goals in 7 games. Imagine how many he might have scored if he'd had that Marshall Mathers dye job that I wanted. I
thought you were going to say imagine how many he would have scored if he'd started all those games.
No, it's the haircut. It's all the haircut. I would start him. I think simply this weekend because he's suited, I think, to the way you expect Palace to set up. They'll be compact, they'll be organised, they'll be deep. And I think you want a presence that's in the box who is asking them questions. And I think at West Ham and at Everton, the front line, it felt just a little bit too fluid at times. Like there was moments where Ahmad was playing the most central of all three of them, and it just didn't feel right to me. So I would start him, but I am conscious at the same time of the counter arguments against that, and I think they're reasonable because there's an argument that is he benefiting actually from coming on later in games? The speed that he showed to get away from Tarkowski and that goal was phenomenal. I think I was reading on the United website this week, it was the second fastest sprint that any United player had made all season long. And I couldn't actually believe it was the second fastest. I couldn't believe there'd been one faster than that.
Brian Mbeumo, wasn't it?
Brian Mbeumo against Fulham on the second game of the season at Craven Cottage, apparently. Okay. And I don't remember that sprint in that game, but like if that was faster than Sesko's, it must have been like spectacular. So there's that. I can see the argument that he's perhaps benefiting from coming on against tired legs, and that's helping him. So there's a case for leaving him on the bench in that respect. And also, I remember I'm a little bit reticent to bring up Rasmus Højlund because I feel like he's
keep doing it, don't we?
A regular point of comparison with Sesko.
Yeah.
But there are so many parallels and similarities between them, and without wanting to relitigate Højlund's time here, I think I was always a little bit sympathetic towards it because I felt like he was overexposed, that he came in very young, very inexperienced, and that too much of a burden was put on his shoulders right away. And I think he dealt with that to begin with and then struggled a bit more as it went on. This is obviously a very different approach for a young striker coming into the Premier League for the first time, coming to a club the size of Manchester United, who's being given minutes here and there to try and impress, and doesn't have that burden, doesn't have that level of expectation, and it's working. The evidence would suggest it's working. So why not continue with that? I would start him this weekend simply because I think he suits the opponents that United are up against. But I don't think the overall approach of playing him here, leaving him out there, bringing him on here, I think that's working so far. So you can't really question it at the same time.
Yeah, you three have set this up nicely because it's a lot more complicated than just saying he's scoring goals, so get him in the team. There's a lot more different aspects to it. Some people would say, actually, it's as simple as that. You know, he is winning games for United at the moment. He's saving games, so get him in from the start and see what he can do then. We did a poll on YouTube, actually, and thank you for everyone that took part in that, and 80% of the fans who responded said that they would start Benjamin Sesko against Crystal Palace this weekend. So there's a clear backing there. Probably not a surprise considering the form that he's showing. But there's some interesting comments to that poll as well. Martian said, he's obviously earned a start, but substitute appearances shouldn't really be seen as a negative. He's providing real impact from the bench. The entire squad and Sesko himself has that feeling of inevitability that when Sesko comes on, he will score. He deserves all the love and praise he's getting, but I also like the impact from the bench. Ian Marriott tied in to your point, Andy. You should have had a third option in this poll. The manager is the best person to decide, which I understand as well. I suppose, Carl, when you look at it, Crystal Palace have got a game tonight, later on, as we record this on Thursday, in the Conference League. We'll talk about, their approach to this game a little bit later. But they're going to be tired potentially from that. They've played a lot of football already this season that they're not used to, so they are likely to be tired. That said, it's not just Sesko who can have an impact off the bench. There's lots of attacking options, and if you were to leave out one of the others, they would also be able to do the same, wouldn't they?
Yeah. I really enjoyed Cunha's contribution off the bench under Carrick as well. I think this is nice. This is nice that we've reached the point in Manchester United's front line and there are options. There are genuine players that can come off the bench and can contribute and get a goal or at least create something out of nothing, where I'd say definitely there were points under Ruben Amorim where it felt like certain players were playing by default. There was no one else in form or available to play and therefore players were getting overexposed, as Chris just said there too. So this is a nice feeling. I definitely think coming off the bench in the second half against Crystal Palace is a pretty sweet role, because if you remember the game against Palace at Selhurst Park, they completely ran out of legs past the hour mark.
Yeah.
They've got a squad that is too small, I would say, for this Thursday-Sunday treadmill of football, and they do tire, and they have been really tired from at least November time, October time. So, yeah, if you're Sesko, going by the conversation we had with Sesko in the mix zone, he doesn't seem too worried either way, because he believes himself and he knows that he can contribute. And I think there are 2 or 3 other players in this United squad that can contribute off the bench and will have a lot to say in the second half, particularly against Palace.
Yeah, it's keeping the fire in these players as well, Andy, isn't it, a little bit? I watched Sesko after the game and I was struck by how happy he was. And that was despite being asked in every single interview, should you be starting the game? Are you happy with being on the bench? And he seemed very comfortable, very calm with it all. We spoke about this again on the last show, but it feels like they've had a proper conversation about this, a proper consideration about exactly the right way to use him. And he seems fully on board with what Michael Carrick is deciding at the moment. You just want to make sure that he's keeping this edge, don't you? And you don't want him to change from the moment that he's in right now. You don't want it to become heavier, the fact that he's not starting games, and him not seeming to have that same impact and that same demeanour about being named amongst the substitutes.
Well, he is keeping his edge because he's making an impact in every single game that he's playing. This is Sesko for now. This is him as a young lad in his first season. This isn't the 25-year-old who's hopefully become the main striker, one of the best strikers in the world, who would probably have a little bit more ego, would probably be wanting to start because he's chasing totals to be the Premier League's top scorer. You know, I look at these goal scoring charts in recent years and there's an absence of Manchester United players in there. That's something I would like to see change. And after United won the league in 67, they went 20 years without a player scoring 20 league goals until Brian McClair did it. You know, 20 years. It was a huge issue at the time. And thankfully, we've seen loads of top goal scorers and loads fail as well and been sold off for a lot less than they've bought or come through the academy and it hasn't worked out. And I'm told from people within the club that he has got huge potential. And it was a pretty bold move, moving Højlund on and bringing Sesko in. He cost a lot of money and he had his critics early on, but mentally, and he used that word the other night, I think he's pretty strong. His confidence is growing. He's in a new league. He's in a new city. His manager is good with him. His teammates are good with him. Look, if he scores a hat-trick, he's going to have to start starting matches and a reward to starting.
What if it's a hat-trick off the bench?
Well, that's incredibly difficult to do. Maybe that's unfair because he can't really do any more than what he is doing. But this is also an odd season because there's no matches. I don't doubt if Manchester United had Crystal Palace's schedule of games, he would be starting loads of matches.
Well, they're going to have that this week because they've got Newcastle away with not much of a turnaround in the midweek. So
maybe that is the time to do it. And you know, Newcastle were one of the clubs who wanted him, who I was told offered him more than what Manchester United paid for him, but he really wanted to join Manchester United, and I was told his agent had to take a shave on the fee that he get because he chose to go to Old Trafford rather than St James's Park. So it's all these little psychological reasons but I just think we've got to trust the manager. We're in a really nice position at the moment where the team are winning games that I don't think the team would have won even before Christmas, even though Ruben Amorim does deserve some credit for the work that he did. But if he started against Palace, I don't think a single person would have an issue with that. But that's for the manager. He will see that, you know, he might think Ahmad wasn't quite with it the other day and I'll just shuffle it around there. It's just a really nice problem to have.
It's a big call, Critch, to keep him on the bench as well, isn't it? Because it's a thin line between this working and this not working in a way. I mean, if United hadn't have got that winning goal at Hill Dickinson, would it have been framed differently, the idea that Sesko didn't start because there was so much expectation that he would? If he'd not got the equaliser against West Ham and United lose that game, again, the conversation is similar. So, you know, it's a brave call to keep him on the bench from Carrick, and it shows the type of manager that he is. I mean, I go back to that first game that he ever had as the interim last time around, and he drops Cristiano Ronaldo on his first team sheet. I mean, that's not a man who's backward in coming forwards and making a selection decision.
No, absolutely not. And what have we seen from him so far? It's that he has a clear idea of how he wants to set this team up and essentially what his first choice 11 is. And he's barely made any changes from that 11 unless they've been enforced. Dorgu dropped out after being injured. Martinez dropping out after being injured the other night. Otherwise, it's been very much him trying to keep the same idea. Now, as I said before, I do think over the last couple of games, it's raised a few questions, certainly in the first half performances, as to whether a slightly different approach or slightly different personnel would suit different opponents, ones who are a bit more determined to sit in and invite pressure and aren't going to give you as much space. And if you think about the goal that Sesko scores the other night, it comes from a moment in the game where there is a lot of space to play into, which wasn't necessarily the character of the rest of the game. So I don't know if look, it's very hard to be critical of Michael Carrick right now, and I'm not trying to be. I'm just suggesting that maybe there will be moments where he needs to be a little bit more flexible in that approach further down the line. But on the basis of the results so far, you can't really make too many criticisms of him.
Carl, if Sesko started, who'd drop out?
I think it's got to be Ahmad at this current point in time. He's not having the greatest run of form. I like Cunha off the bench. I think he was very good when he came off the bench in the Manchester derby, and then again against Arsenal. And I'm got some hesitations about width on the left-hand side, but Ahmad out, Boomer going to the right wing, Cunha left, Sesko up top would be my suggested 11 for this match. Well, suggested 11? Suggested front three, I should say.
I was going to say that would be a bit of a longer conversation, maybe. Critch, the thing is, Ahmad, I think you mentioned him before in what you were saying, or Andy did, one of you did anyway, about seeing that at Hill Dickinson, he wasn't quite at the levels that he's shown at times. I mean, his output across this season has not been as good as the others. 2 goals, 3 assists in 21 matches. Now, a lot of those would be, of course, playing at wing-back under Ruben Amorim, but even since he stepped forward in his position under Michael Carrick, no goals, no assists so far. Nothing since he came back from AFCON in terms of goal involvements. But his all-round work, his defensive work, it was something that Liam praised in the comments to that poll about Sesko starting as well. Deserves credit. Amorim probably deserves credit for that as well in teaching him the wing-back role. So he's still an important cog, even if the goal involvement numbers are not where they maybe should be, I suppose.
I think so, because I think it's very tempting to often judge forward players, especially those in that front line, on their output alone. And look, that has to be a huge part of the performance, like analysis, review, whatever you want to call it. Like, that's what you have to look at, because that's what they're there to do. But I even think to the Manchester derby, I thought he was excellent that day, Ahmad, in terms of how he was getting up and down the pitch, how he was tracking back, how he was doing the dirty work off the ball and also on the ball as well, making things happen. I don't think he's been quite at that level over the last couple of games, but that's understandable. He's somebody who, I think during the Amorim period, even if he wasn't popping off the page in terms of his numbers, I actually thought that he was one of United's better performers this season, and I actually felt that maybe that wing-back role suited him a little bit more, and he was growing into it and starting to understand it and starting to adapt to it. And I thought it certainly suited him a lot more than when he was playing in either of the sort of number 10 roles that Amorim played. It felt like he was the one player in that wing-back position who was capable of really giving it the thrust and attacking verve that it needed and that you required in those positions, because otherwise, if he didn't have that there, the whole system looked a bit stale. So he was really important in that. And he spent the best part of a year, more than that, learning that role, learning that position, adapting his game. And now suddenly you're asking him to change it completely, forget all that and go back to what he used to do. There's going to be a period of transition within that and another period of adaptation. And I think that's what we're seeing. Look, if somebody's going to drop out right now, I think it probably is him for Sesko. But I don't think that's necessarily, a black mark against his name. I think he's still shown enough over the last few weeks that he's still going to be an important part of this front line going forward.
Yeah, we've got to get back to a point where rotating players becomes normal again as well. It's not like a huge sensational thing if someone's dropped. I know we've just had a 15-minute conversation about someone having to start or not, so maybe I'm contradicting myself slightly, but Andy, this has to become a normal thing, doesn't it? That players are in, players are out. You're not brilliant if you start, and you're not terrible if you're on the bench. Could you make an argument for anyone else dropping out if Sesko was starting the game against Palace?
Not a strong one, and yet I thought it was pretty poor at Everton. I thought that until he made the assist, Brian Mbeumo was having one of his poorest games for Manchester United. Still a squad going through a huge transition. It's gone through a huge one in the last 2 years, but there's also a realism. This isn't a squad that's going to be winning the league, and probably not even next season. There still needs to be 3, 4, 5, 6 new players coming in from when we're looking at a side which Manchester United internally feel will be winning Premier Leagues, but not just that, competing across 3 or 4 fronts, the opposite of this season. So we're not at that point. However strong Manchester United finish this season, I don't think the team will start as favourites for the Premier League next season, even with some good summer recruitment. But your main point is right. We should be leaning towards that. We're talking here about one striker. Without going back again to the treble, there were 4 strikers there, and they all helped each other by pushing each other. 4 totally different types of personalities who could be picked and selected or dropped according, as to one of the points made earlier, to the opponents. And there's been times when Sesko has been on the bench in recent matches where I thought his height really could make a difference if he was on now, as Manchester United try to go ahead after 30, 35 minutes or whatever. There's good coaches there. There's a calmness around Manchester United at the moment, which we also haven't seen. So we're picking out the virtues of having a scorer like Sesko and doing well, but there are positives all over the place. And, if one of these players is tired, because there's players in that squad who are working perfectly, like Harry or Luke Shaw, with the one game a week. That's all going to change next season. This is a complete outlier of a season. And I am absolutely sure that if Sesko is playing as he is, he's going to be picking up loads of starts next season.
Yeah, in terms of the treble season, Andy, I mean, Carl, when you look at that front four of the four strikers that they had in that season, it's basically two players for each position, isn't it? So, United need to get to a point, I guess, where that front three is interchangeable between six different players. So at the moment, you've obviously got the three players who are starting. That's Mbeumo, Cunha and Ahmad. You've got Sesko on the bench. There's Joshua Zirkzee. There's Mason Mount. There's Patrick Dorgu. So in a way, they're overstocked for those positions. I suppose there's Bruno Fernandes to add into that and his role, and whether Mason Mount or Cunha could play in that too. But they're not far off having two players for each position in that role. It's just maybe the quality of some of the players when you move away from that first choice front three, whether the quality is there to be able to say, right, we're going to start him this week, and there isn't a debate about it as much.
Yeah, I think United squad makes a little bit of sense on paper, and then maybe 20 minutes into a game against a team that wants to sit deep, you're like, oh, hang on, you're missing something here. So I'm sure in the next 18 months, we'll be talking about Sesko starting up front and going, are we getting enough crosses in for him? Is he getting the right supply? Because he will be a very different style of striker to compare to, say, Zirkzee, or indeed mythical Manchester United summer signing striker number 2.
Or even Mbeumo, who's starting at the moment in that position predominantly.
Or Patrick Dorgu playing left wing is a different proposition to Cunha playing left wing, because Cunha's going to want to try and tuck inside, whereas Dorgu's on his left foot and he can try and do different things there. And indeed, Michael Carrick says he only really views, of his current options right now, I'm mad that he views more as a winger rather than someone who can come inside into those, can do other positions, which I thought was interesting. I mean, Mason Mount at this point in time is unfortunately a player who exists more on paper than he does on the field. I know he scored a very good goal against Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park, but he unfortunately hasn't been able to contribute much since then. And Mount's in a very interesting role in that he's a good football player, but when everyone is fit, I don't think he's in the best 11 for Manchester United. Now, if Mount's happy with that as being one of the first options off the bench, great. But then you go in again of, well, are you the Bruno deputy? Are you the right wing deputy? Are you this deputy or that deputy? So some things make sense for now. And long may it continue. Long may some of these players avoid injury, particularly in this sort of 11-game sprint now. It is 11 games. 11-game sprint right to the end. With a bit of
breath in the middle, yeah.
Yeah. There are also other things you've got to consider. We are now in Ramadan, so there are certain players that perhaps won't be able to run as much and with the same capabilities as they would during other times of the year. I remember Ole Gunnar Solskjaer saying that Paul Pogba couldn't play in the spring heat at Ellen Road for the 90 minutes as well.
Yeah.
And there are two or three considerations.
Kick off against Palace as well, isn't it? It's not a night game like Everton and Newcastle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that's a reason for these players to drop to the bench, for Muslim players or anyone fasting to drop to the bench. But there are certain things that you just got to factor in, and I'm sure these conversations are already being had too. So the fact that this Sunday game is so close to the Newcastle game, I think there might be 2 or 3 changes and 2 or 3 earlier substitutions. But if Carrick wants to go same again, okay. He's definitely got enough credit in the bank amongst the fan base to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk substitutes, because it's not just been Sesko who's been having the impact off the bench for United in recent weeks. You mentioned Matheus Cunha before. If Laurie was here, he'd be putting his hand up and saying, what about Mason Mount? And obviously that goal that got chalked off against Manchester City. But Lex got in touch and said it's amazing that since Carrick has taken over, 4 goals have been scored by substitutes, all of which have been vital winners or equalisers. There's an assist in there as well. So I'd love to know what the number is for all Amorim's tenure and what the difference in the types of substitutions are made by both coaches. So the stats gone around a lot that United didn't score a goal in the Premier League with a substitute under Amorim in the Premier League. I've said the Premier League twice, but I'm just emphasising in the league this season. They did score against Grimsby. Brian Mbeumo came off the bench to score in that game. So they have done it once this season. I think the record is 2 goals across Amorim's time in charge of Manchester United in the Premier League. But actually, when you look at last season, and I did a little bit of a dig yesterday and had a look through, they scored 12 goals with substitutes under Amorim last season across all competitions. Of those 12, 2 were winners, 4 were equalisers, and I made it 7. So more than half of them were actually vital in getting victories for Manchester United. I mean, there's a equaliser in there for Kobe Mainoo against Lyon, which stood out. 2 goals off the bench for Rasmus Højlund quite early on away at Victoria Pilsen. Mason Mount with a double off the bench against Bilbao Athletic Club, in the home leg. Even Christian Eriksen's final goal, that penalty against Villa, the clincher, was off the bench. So, Critch, this team can do this. It's certainly been an uptick, and we've talked about it. The substitutions have certainly felt braver under Michael Carrick. But this is a good thing that the team has been doing now over a longer period than just the last few matches.
Absolutely, I'm amazed at your statistical research here. Are you coming for my numbers guy title? Is this a play for that? Like, this is incredible work.
I can't but dream, Critch. Yep.
I'm watching you. Don't worry. Look, I think it is absolutely a good thing, as you say. It's a good thing because it also shows that United are still competitive late in games. I think maybe part of the reason why there wasn't so much of this under Ruben Amorim was because sometimes it felt like the game was dead and gone. Like, even if the scoreline was relatively narrow, that United just weren't getting a result that day. And I think
it's interesting that a lot of the sub goals under Amorim came in other competitions. There was only 2 in the Premier League. One of those was a consolation goal away at Brentford in a 4-3 defeat. Mm-hmm. And I forget what the other one was.
The Eriksen one, which was like
Eriksen penalty.
The game had basically won, and it was his last game, and it was like, do you want to take the penalty? So it's a bit of a consolation.
Because Johnny Evans had said no.
Yeah, exactly. He must have come on as a sub that day as well, so it wouldn't have affected the stats, okay. I guess, either way. And obviously there was more emphasis placed on the cup competitions, and particularly the Europa League last season. Which I think you can see in the evidence of this as well. It's risk, isn't it? It's about taking risks. And towards the end of Amorim's reign, and I don't want to use it as a stick to beat him with too much because he's not the United manager anymore, but if there was one common complaint about his substitutions, it was that people didn't think he was being adventurous enough. We were all getting very much used to the hour mark coming by and him swapping one centre-half for another. And if that was such a staple of your in-game management, it's going to raise questions, particularly when you're not getting results. Now, I think with Carrick, we've seen a difference, haven't we? We've seen when Dorgu gets injured at 2-1 at the Emirates, he brings on Sesko, I think I'm right in saying, wasn't it? And even though it goes to 2-2, United then go and win the game. Sesko's performances itself, we spoke about it so much already at the top of the episode, but his impact off the bench has been huge. And it may be that he keeps making an impact on the bench. It may be that that's the way that Carrick sees the best way of using him. I think it is a positive that we're seeing this now because it shows that there's an inherent belief within the group that no game is lost at any point. And I'm not sure that same sense was always there, particularly towards the end under Amorim.
Crystal Palace then, Carl, let's talk about them. United's record actually against them at Old Trafford in recent years isn't brilliant. They've lost the last 2 at home in the Premier League and actually only won 2 of the last 7 meetings in the Premier League at Old Trafford as well. They've obviously beat them in the League Cup during that time, but it doesn't feel like a fixture they've had much joy out of. However, this is probably, in some ways, the worst version of Palace that United will have faced, I think.
Yeah. The wheels, unfortunately, have come off the Oliver Glasner project. They've been strip mined. They've lost Marc Guehi. They've lost Eberechi Eze. Jean-Philippe Mateta is dealing with a knee injury. He's trying to do. I'm bringing up again. He's trying to do a Paul Pogba in that he's got a knee situation, but he doesn't want to get surgery because he's trying to make it for the World Cup. So it's Strand Larsen as their striker. This probably, if Ruben Amorim was still here, would have been the whole week we would have spent arguing about the merits of 3-4-3 and is the system the problem? And Oliver Glasner's 3-4-3 is very different to blah, 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 blah. But as Amorim used to say, a lot can change in football and a lot can change in 2 weeks. And Glasner's gone from Glasner and Palace have gone from being the sort of middleweight Premier League darlings to, unfortunately, having a really looking like a dour ending. I know Sam Allardyce was in the press on Tuesday this week saying that Glasner is risking doing damage to his legacy as a Crystal Palace boss, which I think is a little harsh. If you win an FA Cup and a Community Shield at a club that hasn't won silverware in a very, very long time, you're going to be fondly remembered, even if the ending is a bit sad. So a good time to play Crystal Palace and to put away some bad hoodoo.
United benefited in November by Palace playing in Europe on the Thursday and to win. And that was an unexpected win. It was a really significant win at the time. And right at the start of this season, I raised some doubts about Glasner just from the intel I had. I don't watch Crystal Palace, but I sensed a troubled club right throughout the summer because recruitment had not gone the way in which he had hoped. They've sold some of their best players, so naturally a team's going to suffer. I have zero sympathy for them when it comes to playing Manchester United because, as you said, they've been very effective, frustratingly so, at Old Trafford. In fact, even now, they're 8th in terms of their away performances. They've only got 1 point less on the road than Manchester United. So they've won more away than they've lost away. It's at home where they've really struggled. They've only won 3 of 14 home matches. So United will start as clear favourites, which is actually pretty rare under Carrick, because even when Tottenham came, we were like, can they win this type of game? Same with Fulham. And United have managed to prevail, apart from in that West Ham match away from home. So another big game because we're in a race, and it feels great. We're in a race for 4th. You know, it's not as exciting as we want it to be, but it is a genuine race. Where were we last year? We were 14th and 15th. So it's been a significant improvement. We know we'll watch Adam Wharton because he's one of the several midfielders, both in England and abroad, who Manchester United have been looking at. But they've lost their captain, who's such a good player. I think history will remember Glasner extremely well from a Palace perspective because of that FA Cup win, because of that Community Shield win against top sides. And there's a lot of good around Crystal Palace, that whole South London identity. This isn't Brighton we're talking about, this is Palace.
Unbelievable.
Must win. And I think we'll all be watching how others do, like we did last weekend. You keep winning, the odds are that a Villa will drop points, or a Chelsea or a Liverpool, and then the season comes to the end and then we're the ones in Europe, and we have to think about the worries that Crystal Palace have had to worry about this season, which is playing in Europe on a Thursday without some of the best players.
I guess all this chaos around the Palace manager, Critch, has maybe ruled him out of being a potential permanent successor to Ruben Amorim. Michael in Austria, one of our listeners, is keen to know our opinion of that.
Yeah, look, I think it's natural that they've won 2 of the last 16 games in all competitions, I think. So it's natural that if a manager who might have been in the conversation somewhat, certainly externally at least, over the permanent manager's position, it's natural for his stock to fall if you go through that run of results. I'd also say that the way he's conducted himself, or at least the way that there's definitely a lot of toxicity now between himself and the fan base. I mean, I think they were calling for him to be sacked in the morning over in Bosnia last week, and then it was pretty hostile reception for him on Sunday when they played against Wolves as well. He's obviously had a bit of a differences between those upstairs as well. I don't think Jason Wilcox is especially desperate for another big ding-dong in his office with whoever's in the manager's position at Manchester United again anytime soon. And I would question also whether really Oliver Glasner was ever the right fit anyway. I mean, Crystal Palace, he's had a lot of success there. The FA Cup win, absolutely fantastic. The style of football, though, is very different to the style of football that I think a lot of people would expect a United team to play. They've had a lot of success in sitting deep, being compact, being organised, playing on the counter-attack. And though some of those elements are associated with United teams of old, I think they have the lowest possession of any team on average in the league. And that type of manager doesn't necessarily translate to your big six clubs to clubs who are expected to go and dominate teams and be protagonists every week. You can only look to Thomas Frank and Tottenham to see evidence of that this season. So I'm not sure it ever would have really been the right fit. I'm not sure if he was ever much of a leading candidate anyway for it. And I think if he wasn't a couple of months ago when things were going pretty well at Palace, then he certainly isn't now.
I think if you're expected to win games with 32% of possession like Glasner is, or Thomas Frank at Brentford, it is extremely different to being at Manchester United, apart from when Manchester United played the first two games under Michael Carrick against City and Arsenal. He was definitely respected, as was Thomas Frank, but absolutely not someone who I have heard in the conversation to be a future Manchester United manager.
Okay. Right, let's talk finances. Everyone's excited. Look at Critch leaning forward. Here he goes. Eyebrows up. You just have a quick sip, mate. I hope it's water in there. United have released their second quarter results for 2025. I think that's right. Is that the second quarter results? I think that's the right way of phrasing it.
Yes, the second quarter. That's correct. Of 2025-26.
Thank you very much. Not maybe the most revelatory announcement we've ever seen. There is more to come, which we'll get into in a moment. But what stands out to you from the figures that were announced on Wednesday?
Yeah, so I agree, not the most revelatory. I think back in the days of when we were talking about FFP and PSR all the time, there'd be stuff to dig into and implications for transfers further down the line. Less so now, I think. What we laid on The Athletic was the fact that there's been a £14 million reduction in the wage bill year on year. You might expect that, of course, because we've seen some big, high-status, high-profile names leave the club, or at least leave the club temporarily this summer, the likes of Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, Andre Onana, even Rasmus Højlund, all these players leaving, Alejandro Garnacho to a lesser extent as well, and Anthony. These players leaving frees up space in the wage bill. The other factor that has led to a reduced wage bill is, of course, the job cuts and the internal restructuring that we've seen over the past couple of years. It has been an era of retrenchment, of cutting costs. Often when we talked about wage bills falling, we would say that this was a result of not being in the Champions League because there's a 25% cut, but that's not the case now because they weren't in the Champions League last season either. So this is a real terms cut in the amount of spending on wages at United, and that's despite signing Mbeumo, signing Sesko, signing Cunha, etc. So I thought that was interesting. I think what a lot of other people have picked up on is the fact that the club posted an operating profit of 32.6 million, which was like the headline figure. It was the top thing in the club's press release that they sent out. That was up from 3.1 million last year. And I think there was a sense that this was evidence that all that cost cutting that they've done is starting to have an effect in terms of profitability. Now, the one caveat I would put on that, and it's a caveat from my colleague Chris Weatherspoon, who is the Athletics bookkeeper and financial expert, he was saying that this figure, this operating profit figure, United include player sales in that. Now, that typically a lot of clubs wouldn't do that. Some clubs do, some clubs don't. There's a bit of a debate of whether you should or shouldn't. Us at The Athletic, we don't, in order to keep things consistent. And if you take that figure out, then it's actually that £32.6 million operating profit turns into a 15.7 million loss. So the argument is that, if we're just looking, if we're taking it down to brass tacks and looking at the operations of the club on a day-to-day basis, there's still quite a long way to go before we can say that the club is going to be profitable again. And you can see that because the other thing that I think is interesting to point out is that revenues, and this is always the headline figure, they were down compared to the same period last year. And we've spoke recently, haven't we, about the struggles with the commercial operation, how United still don't have a training kit sponsor this season after the Tezos deal expired. Match day was down as well, mostly because there's so many fewer games at Old Trafford this season, no European football, no domestic cup competitions essentially as well. That's had an effect there. Ticket price rises have helped offset that a little bit, and I think that's significant. We've seen big rises, and that has helped that fall in match day revenue to only be quite small. But that's the story there. And look, as I say, I think a healthy-ish set of numbers to look into, but also still a long way to go before we can say that the club has righted a lot of the wrongs, if you like, of the last few years financially.
Yeah, and the concerning aspect, or the most concerning aspect from what I saw as well, is the fact that the debt has gone up again because they've borrowed more money from the credit facility, which presumably was to facilitate some of the transfers that they did in the summer. I mean, there's no sign of that coming down even.
No sign of it coming down. And this is the result of years and years of spending money while you've not been bringing as much money in as you used to. You know, United have spent like a club that qualifies for the Champions League regularly, even though they haven't over the last few seasons. You need to borrow money in order to keep doing that. And United have done through that credit facility, as you mentioned, and it helped finance those moves for Sesko, Cunha and Amumo last summer. So it's now 777 million, which I think is up there as potentially a record in terms of the post-Glazer era. I think the interesting thing to note about that is, and people will have seen maybe on social media, that a couple of weeks ago there was some interesting files that were filed to Companies House by United's holding company that, well, you read them, it's in a lot of legalese. Even somebody like me can't understand this stuff, honestly. But I think the overall sense is this is possibly related to the debt. Now, I think we could learn more about what those files mean when the full Q2 report is released, and we're expecting that essentially today, later today, maybe tomorrow, over the next couple of hours, maybe even. So after the time you listen to this podcast, probably, so we can discuss that on Monday or whatever. But there's going to be more detail coming out in the near future about those. And the other thing to look out for as well, and one thing people might have been expecting, is Ruben Amorim's compensation. How much was the payoff? Now, I think we reported on The Athletic at the time, 10 million. I guess we find out now whether we were right about that or not, because we were expecting that to be in the full report as well. But that was obviously after the 31st of December cut-off period. Amorim was sacked on January 5th, I think. So it's not included in these results, but we will see it included as like this happened after the event in the fuller release that we expect imminently.
Andy?
I sense the oil tanker is being turned around, and it's been extremely painful. People who've done nothing wrong have lost their jobs, but Manchester United was losing money, was set up to be a club which was not just being in the Champions League, but reaching the last 8 of the Champions League, and everything flowed from that, including attracting commercial partners. It's essential that United get into Europe. Slight double-edged sword with that, because there'll need to be a lot more investment into the squad to deal with the extra games, but it is essential that United are playing European competition. I think recruitment, United have drawn heavily on the credit facility, but recruitment has been positive. That goal the other night came from 3 players who arrived for this season. And Senna Lemons has been the main talking point of this season. An interview will come out today, which he did as part of Manchester United's foundation, who do really good work at a school in Partington, close to Manchester, on Wednesday. And United, if the team get better, as they are doing, that will make this sort of virtuous circle, one which Ferran Soriano, Manchester City's main executive, long preached at Barcelona, where, you know, if you're United trying to attract sponsorship and you've just finished 15th, it's really difficult. But if you're going back into Europe and you've got Sesko scoring every week and you've got some headliners and there's an excitement brought back and suddenly it's looking like how people expect Manchester United to look like, it becomes a much bigger ticket. It's amazing that ticket demand has still been so high because Manchester United have been so poor, but it has been, and I think it's pointing in the right direction. I don't know whether it's going to work out. The historical debt is a bad thing. That's the Glazers. We've made our feelings clear on this podcast about the Glazers multiple times since the start of this podcast. Interestingly, someone in finance said to me a few weeks ago, United got it wrong by having no debt pre-Glazers, because it was so well run and so profitable that it made the club someone who predators could look at and go, that's too good to be true. They're making too much money. In fact, we can use their own money and pile the debt against what Manchester United are making. And I've not heard that view before. But I think we're talking now a high point under the Ineos ownership. Notwithstanding the comments by Sir Jim Ratcliffe, we all expressed our views on them. If we can finish this season, get into the Champions League, I think ticket prices remains an issue, especially for season ticket holders. they shouldn't be excessive at all, then optimism will continue to come back and things will flow from that. The merch will be up. You know, the merch has been merchandise. I'm sounding like I'm a merchy American man here, aren't I, when I'm not? That gets really hit when the games keep getting shifted. You know, 6-figure hits when a game is played on a Monday night, for example. And games will continue to be shifted to a Monday night because Manchester United are so popular and a big TV draw, and Manchester United are not in Europe. So we're going to have more awkward conversations before the end of the season about that. We've just got to get this season behind us. But I can see a logic to the financial strategy. The academy system has, I won't say ripped up and started again, but pretty close to that. Will it work? I don't know. But there's people there who know what they're doing.
Okay, well, let's bring it back to the football on the pitch to finish, if we can, for the last couple of bits of conversation. We've had a lovely message from Shane, Carl. He said, it was lovely to hear laughter on the post-Everton pod. I don't want to ruin the vibes, but are we getting too confident? You are ruining the vibes, Shane. Don't ask those questions. Would love to hear a match-by-match prediction chat to see how many more points you all think United will get in the league, and then maybe I can join in on the giddiness. Well, Shane, I'm not going to do every single game because that is an entire podcast on its own, I think. But Carl, when you look at the running, and not just United's running, the rivals as well, Liverpool, Chelsea, Aston Villa potentially now too, they're only a couple of points ahead. What do you see as the picture? How do you see this shaping up? Yeah, we need to say thank you as well, because a different Shane provided us with a lovely little table and graphic that we can refer to here of all the fixtures
Shanes,
compared.
See? It's a squad game over here. So one thing that's sticking out to me is a very difficult, or a comparatively speaking, a more difficult run-in for Chelsea. A Chelsea team that, to my mind, they just do a lot of daft things on a football field. A lot of red cards, a lot of strange defensive errors, and I think if one team is likely to fall out of this 4-way race for the top 5, I'm taking my shiny penny away from Chelsea. I think
Really?
Aston Villa.
That's certain, Carl.
I just don't. I think Chelsea's propensity to get sending offs and do silly things in football matches mean they might end up in the Europa places rather than the top 5. I don't want to bet against Liverpool, unfortunately, because they do have 2 or 3 very good football players that can swing things on a dime. I mean, Unai Emery's made Manchester United look silly on more than one occasion in recent seasons. So I think I said 5th on Tuesday's episode.
Yeah.
So Villa and then United and Liverpool scrapping over some places make the most sense to me.
Yeah, okay. I mean, Liam Toomey did an article on The Athletic where he looked at who had the most difficult running of all the teams actually in the Premier League. And of all those sides, it was Chelsea who were the ones who were bottom of that table, with the statistical data suggesting that they had the hardest fixtures remaining. I mean, Critch, when you look at it, you've obviously got some difficult headline matches for Manchester United. I mean, Newcastle away, Aston Villa at home, Liverpool at home, Chelsea away, probably the most difficult, I suppose. But then there's also matches against teams like Sunderland, Brighton, Brentford potentially by that point, Nottingham Forest potentially by that point, who have not really got lots to play for. There's not really any relegation teams in there, only teams fighting against relegation, I should say. Maybe Leeds, I suppose, but that's at home.
Forest would be.
Well, maybe, but then by then, if they've upticked in form, then perhaps they will have pulled themselves away. It's the second to last game of the season. So, you know, if you're looking across the next 3 or 4 games, there's not really anyone in there from a relegation perspective. You're right, we probably should include Forest. I've maybe made that sound easier than it is. But what do you think?
Well, the thing is, you're right to point that out, because it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Like, you can look at this and say, well, even if you've got an easier run-in and you're facing all of the bottom 3, it's like the bottom 3 might be scrapping for their lives and might have so much more hanging on it than teams who are in mid-table and are on the beach. And so I used to read a lot into these sorts of run-ins and fixture difficulty calculators myself, because my brain was like wired on FPL, and like I was just trying to like game the system. But what I figured out, what I learned from that really, is that towards the end of the season, it's a cliche, but the form book sort of goes out the window, just because teams have different incentives and different expectations. And so
who's on the beach?
Exactly. So I think that United, look, for me, it's especially this season, we've seen that the standard of the Premier League is probably more level from 1st to 20th than it has been in many other seasons. Like, it feels like just about anybody can beat anybody on any given weekend. And I don't know whether that means everyone's pretty good or everyone's pretty bad or whatever, but it feels a lot tighter than it's ever been before in terms of that standard of quality. And so I wouldn't read too much into this. I think United's biggest advantage over anybody, and particularly the teams that they're up against, is the fact that by and large, they're playing one game a week. They've got that time on the training pitch. From everything that we're hearing since Carrick's come in, that time on the training pitch is now being utilised and used, and players are enjoying the training sessions. They're finding them useful. They're finding them that they've improved, to be blunt, to be honest. And having that time and having that rest and having that period between games, I think is going to be a huge feather in United's cap going down this track, and is why, to be honest, after the Tottenham game, I think I was getting quite giddy and saying, why not second? Like, City could lose to Liverpool tomorrow and they're only 3 points off then, and maybe that's gone. But look at the way that Villa are sort of faltering a little bit. Nobody's really convincing. Why not third? Why not fourth? I would expect United to be aiming for those positions, certainly now, and expecting to finish in those positions simply because they've got this advantage over their immediate rivals that could be really useful down the stretch.
Yeah, the other thing, Andy, is when you look at the games, everyone plays each other of these four sides. You know, Manchester United still have to play Liverpool, Chelsea and Aston Villa. Everyone still has to play each other. There's some really sticky periods for these teams as well, which is obviously a good thing for United. I mean, look at Villa's end to the season. The final week, they could have Liverpool, the Europa League final, and Manchester City on the final day, which would be a very difficult finish for them potentially. I mean, Liverpool have got back-to-back games against United, Chelsea and Aston Villa at the start of May as well. So, the picture is becoming a little bit clearer. It's becoming a bit easier to say, right, 11 games left, who's going to go where? It's shaping up nicely.
And it's lovely to be in this position. We said at the start of this season, European football, anything else is a bonus. If that becomes Champions League football, I'm now at the stage where I'd be a bit disappointed if it wasn't Champions League football, especially with a fifth place looking like Champions League is going to be good enough for qualifying. We'll learn a lot more about Michael Carrick. There's side issues here. It's not about where Manchester United finish. We'll learn about other managers. How can Emery do at Aston Villa? Carrick. If he loses 5 of his last 6 games, you're going to see a slump in confidence in him. If he keeps this going, then you're going to hear more emboldened conversations about him being Manchester United manager for next season. And decision has not been made, so this is all for to play for. And I'll go to Old Trafford when it's Villa at home, thinking this is a big game, not the biggest games like we were used to years ago. This game actually matters. We really need the points today. Even Palace on Sunday, we were not doing this a week ago, and all the players were coming out with cliches a year ago. Yeah, we'll do our best at the weekend. But privately, they hated what was happening. The defeat after the defeat and the little bright spots of the Europa League. We've not even got that this year, but we have got the league. And then the big one, Brighton away on the 24th of May, where Manchester United should absolutely smash them, hopefully to send them down. Sorry, I'm getting a bit carried away because they're not going down here. It's good. It's bliss to be alive as a Manchester United fan. One wrote an article about. So, yeah.
He roasted what? Sorry.
Right. It's a pretty sad story, this, but people should know this, right? One of the best young writers, and he died in 1997, was called Gavin Hills, and he was Amnesty International's Young Writer of the Year. Brilliant writer. He'd go to places in the world where the BBC wouldn't send correspondence, like to Angola, and I really looked up to Gavin Hills. And just Google Gavin Hills' name, and he took a week off, and he was fishing on a rock in Cornwall, and a wave swept him away, and he died, and he was only 30 years old. He was a brilliant writer. I'd go as far as say the best young writer in the country, and he was a Manchester United fan. He was from Carl's neck of the woods, and one entire side of his apartment in North London, one of these sort of London Fields, Hackney areas, was a picture of Matt Busby. And Gavin was really inspirational to me as a young man, and when he died, it was pretty big news, and a book came out written by his friends, and it was called Bliss to be Alive. And he lived a hell of a life, and it feels that now. I'm stretching it by saying it's Manchester United in the but it's true. It's good. I'm enjoying it.
It is good, and the culture doesn't stop there either, does it? Because Culture Vulture Andy Mitten, what are you doing on Friday night, just before we finish the podcast?
You're a swine for this. I've been I've been invited to the Brit Awards this weekend.
Andy?
I don't know why, but I ask questions and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. I've been invited with my wife to the Brit Awards, which are in Manchester, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
And I'd much rather be going to, Vauxhall Motors against Trafford on Saturday, but I've gone to a glamorous event and to see a load of artists who I've never heard of. I know I've heard of Harry Styles, but I know his dad Des rather than his son. My wife absolutely loves someone called Olivia Deansgate or whatever she's called. She's another one from Carl's neck of the woods. So why not have these moments in life?
Good.
I'm going to the Brits.
Absolutely.
I don't know why I've been invited, mate.
No,
So
that's
Olivia,
fair enough.
Olivia Dean is wonderful, and they've renamed the tram stop at Deansgate Olivia Deansgate for the last couple of days because obviously it's a big. They're making a big effort in Manchester for it because this is the first time it's being hosted. Well, first time in a little bit that it's being hosted outside of London. So crack on, enjoy it. If anyone out there is offering invites, I am free on Saturday night.
Andy, you said that you needed to do a little bit of research before you went to the awards. So we're just going to help with that. We're going to play a little game of Brits or bogus. I'm going to give you the name of an artist and you have to tell me whether they're a Brit nominee or whether I've just made them up completely.
Right, but before you do that, you're making me out to not know my music.
We're about to find out. We're about to find out, Andy.
I once put Paul Heaton on in concert in Barcelona. I did it by myself. So
I
just
don't know
remember
if Paul
that.
Heaton's going to be at the Brits in 2026, Andy, but...
Right, well, okay, fair enough. I'm just adding my musical credentials. But go on, hit me.
You work with Nat King Cole or Frank Sinatra? I don't know. Anyway, right, let's play it. Brits or bogus, don't ruin my game. So first up, Album of the Year. It's been nominated, The Boy Who Played the Harp. Is it by Dave or Steve?
Dave.
Correct. Well done. He's a Manchester
Massive
United
Man
fan.
That's the
United
only
fan.
reason I got that. Not heard the
You
album.
needed to get that right. Which of these acts are up for Group of the Year? Dry Arm or Wet Leg?
Wet Leg, I've heard of them.
Oh, we're doing all right here, actually. Which of these two are up for Artist of the Year? Pink Pantheress or Top Cat S?
Never heard of either of them. Sorry, I know people will be laughing at me, but I will go for Pink Pantheress.
Oh, 3 out of 3. Look at
3
him
out of 3.
fly here. Okay, hopefully these are going to get harder. Best Dance Act, Scott Again or Fred Again?
Fred Again, I know him. He's decent. I even can name a few of his songs. He's a posh kid from Carlsway, like most of them.
You're surprising me here. Okay, next one. International Group of the Year, Turnstile or Terraces?
Turnstile.
Turnstile, correct. Andy Mitten, my goodness me.
Viva Ronaldo, I'm flying here, aren't I?
You don't need to do any research. This has gone far better than I wanted it to. Anyway, last one. Breakthrough Artist, Paul Can't Dance or Barry Can't Swim?
No idea, so I'm going to go for Paul Can't Dance.
At least you got one wrong. It's Barry Can't Swim, but well done, Mr. Mitten. Very good. Much better than I anticipated. I don't even think we can clip that up for socials. It was too good, but never mind. Enjoy your night. I hope you have a fantastic time and fit in like a hand in a glove like you always do. Make sure you pick your outfit out properly. I'm sure you'll have a friend or two to sort you out on that front. But it's been brilliant to do Talk the Devils with you, and you, Critch, and you, Carl, as well, of course. Thank you for everyone for listening and watching as well. Thanks for getting involved too. If you want to send us an email, you always can. devilspod@theathletic.com, and we'll speak to you again after Palace. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching this episode of Talk the Devils. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you've not done already. Like the video and also get involved in the comments too, and click the bell to make sure that you never miss an episode with myself, Andy Mitten, Carl Anker and Laurie Whitwell. There's also our social channels @TOT Devils on Instagram, X and TikTok. Thanks for watching.